Hi there, my name is Cinnamon Roll, and I'm building a school bus into a home. I'm not going to waste any time, gonna get right into it. In last week's video, I ran out of rivets, so I finished up putting those into the rub rail on the driver's side. I also started up the bus and repositioned it for the winter months. After that, I welded up a few more spots on the front. I needed to make a new gauge cluster because the old one was in pretty bad shape, so what I attempted to do was trace out the old panel onto a new piece of metal. I then cut out the panel with a grinder and a hole saw. After that, I cut out the backlight mounts from the original plastic panel because I was going to glue them onto the back of the new panel later. I then used tape to make templates of the backlight mounts and attach them to the metal so that I would know where to cut. After that, I used my Dremel to clean up the inside corners of some of the holes. I then used a die grinder along with a grinder with a flap wheel disc to fine-tune the sizes of the holes so that they would fit the gauges correctly. Once that was complete, I sanded everything down with 80 grit sandpaper. I gave it a coat of paint and glued the backlight mounts to the panel, but I'm not going to show you that because, well, it all turned out to be a waste of time. The panel simply didn't fit, so I gave up on that for now and decided to work on something else. In last week's video, I established that the bus runs, and it runs well, so it was time to clean up the mess of wiring that I made when I was trying to diagnose my not problem. My first step in doing so was to reattach this electrical panel. After that, I reinstalled one of the original bus fans and wired it into a switch on the dash panel. Originally I was going to get rid of these, but I decided to keep them because I can use them as additional ways to defrost the windshield in the wintertime and keep them from fogging up. I then wired up the switch with new power and ground to the main power distribution panel. Now that I had everything pretty much wired up the way I wanted it, I started working on cable managing it all. So I needed a way to quickly connect and disconnect all the marker lights and blinkers that I installed in the last video. The reason I'm doing this is because if there's ever an issue with one of the lights, I want to be able to replace it fairly easily. I'm using crimped spade connectors for this, mostly because they're cheap and easy to use, and I know they work. Winter finally came, and let's just say I wasn't happy about it.
So for anybody out there who stands in this kind of weather and goes, "Oh yes, I like winter," yeah, you're a freaking psychopath.
Despite my despair over the weather, there was work to be done. I repainted the covers over the electrical panel and installed them, and then I went and bought a 30-foot camping trailer. Yep, you heard that right. Now the body on this thing is in rough shape, and I do mean rough shape. But I only paid $50 for the thing. You're probably thinking I'm crazy for buying something like this for so little, but my end goal for this trailer is to turn it into a flatbed trailer for hauling my car behind the bus and to use whatever might be useful from the trailer in the bus build. I had a good look at the underside of this trailer, and the frame, axles, and wheels are all in really good shape. I had originally thought that maybe during the summer months I could live in it for a little while, but after having a good look at the interior, I decided that would not be a smart decision. So I know this is a 30-foot trailer, and I know that's a lot of length to contend with for towing behind a bus, but I have plans on how I can shorten this thing up and make it suitable for hauling a vehicle or two. So I started working on ripping out the interior. Along with the stove and range hood, I decided to keep the propane water heater, the propane space heater, the plastic water tank, the RV inverter, this diaphragm pump, and a few other odds and ends. Some of the stuff I ended up using, and some of it I didn't, but this stuff alone has probably saved me about $1,000 in new supplies. So I plan to do closed cell spray foam on the walls and ceiling of this bus. The thing is, if I ever want to remove or replace the blinkers and marker lights, I need to make some cavities where all the connections can stay separate from the spray foam. My idea was to take some 2.5-inch drain pipe and some leftover plastic from a cutting board and make some improvised junction boxes. After slicing the PVC pipe into 1-inch sections, I used a hole saw to cut out some plugs from the cutting board. I then glued the plugs to the PVC pipe with some flex glue. Rinse and repeat 16 times. After that, I drilled some holes for the wires to run through. Some I put in the sides, and some I drilled through the back depending on where each of these are located. That done, I glued them into place in the bus. Now I didn't glue them super thoroughly. The idea is that the spray foam will hold these in place. I just needed a way to locate these where I wanted them until that point arrives. I planned to reuse the doors on the bus, but I had to remove them to modify them for insulation. However, while I was working on them, I needed a way to keep the door openings sealed up, so I ripped some 2x4s into 2x2s and whipped up a quick and dirty door frame. I cut up some pink foam pieces and shoved them into the doorframe. That done, my next order of business was to remove the bus doors. I first removed the Allen bolts from the top of the doors. I realized in hindsight that I probably should have done this last, but oh well, live and learn. I spent quite a while trying to figure out how these doors were mounted, and I eventually learned that if I removed the 4 bolts from under the door jamb, I could kinda slide the bottoms of the doors out. This caused the doors to fall completely over. I'm lucky they didn't break, and this was why I should have left those Allen bolts in the tops of the doors. After the doors were removed, I strapped in my temporary door. So after my first attempt at making the gauge cluster, I decided to try again, this time with clear acrylic panels. Acrylic is a little thicker than the metal I was using, so the gauges should clamp better, and it's also clear, so locating where the holes need to go should be a lot easier. I just gotta say, this worked out pretty darn well. I then made a new gauge layout that wouldn't interfere with the gauge shroud or with other gauges. I just used a red Sharpie marker right on the panel because there was a protective film on it, and I would remove that later anyways. I then attached the panel to the shroud and traced out the final dimensions. After once again removing the panel, I cut out the smaller holes with the hole saw. For all the other cuts, I decided to set up the router table. Now I did test this on a scrap piece of acrylic to make sure that this would not only be possible, but also safe. The router bit cut through the panel like butter. The only issue I ran into was plastic buildup on the router bit, which I would have to stop and remove every once in a while. Unlike my last gauge panel, this time I really took my time to make sure that everything was as exact as possible, and it paid off big time. This panel turned out much better than the last one I did. I then cut out the circles for the backlighting on the panel. Now it's kinda hard to explain why I'm doing this, so I'll show you later. I then grabbed the sander and cleaned up all the edges of the acrylic. Here's the old, and here's the new. One last test fit with the shroud, and then I checked to make sure all the gauges would fit. And then it was time for paint. Certain things are going to be backlit, so those areas I had to paint around so that the light wouldn't bleed through too easily. So that's what I was doing earlier with cutting out those circles. Anywhere there is protective film on the panel will be clear, and anything that is exposed will be painted black. I sanded with 80 grit sandpaper so that the paint would have something to stick to. And then I sprayed the panels with black spray paint. Now, I know it doesn't really look all that professional, but I think for now this will work. We had a halfway decent day, and it was warm enough to get some seam sealing done, so I spent some time working on that. And it's there that I will end this video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you'd consider liking and subscribing. It's by no means mandatory, but it does help this channel grow. Thank you so much for watching, enjoy your day, and I'll see you next time.